about to start. So those of you back there, please come in quietly. Now we want to welcome you to the continuation. I want to welcome you to the continuation of the TRC thematic and institutional hearings. And today we're conducting a hearing here at the office of the TRC. And want to invite all of you who are here. And to officially begin, I ask that we kindly stand to observe a few moments of silent prayer. And in that moment, let us please remember those who lost their lives during our turbulent period. I will ask you to kindly remain standing as we administer the oath.
I, Ellen Johnson, say, do solemnly swear that my testimony that I've come to give to the TRC of Liberia is the truth and nothing but the whole truth. So help me God.
We want to formally welcome you to this session of the TRC's thematic public hearings. In the same vein, we want to thank you very much for honoring the invitation of the Commission to come and share your experience and perspectives with the Commission and the people of Liberia. We realize you have a very tight and hectic schedule, but notwithstanding, you managed to find time to come to the Commission under these conditions for the purpose of making your contribution to the process of soul-searching of our nation and finding the basis for national reconciliation and peace. For us at the Commission, we feel it is a patriotic undertaking of all Liberians to support this process, which is meant to lay the foundation for future progress of our nation, and at the same time find a way out of our situation so that reconciliation can be an enduring process for our country. We thank you for the support you've given to the process, which is further manifested by your presence. At the Commission, we felt that our investigation will be incomplete if we do not speak, if we do not hear, we don't give the opportunity to persons, Liberians who have been around during the period of 79 to 2003, who have peculiar knowledge about what transpired during that period, who have made contributions or who participated one way or another as activists or otherwise. We realized that in the 70s, leading up to 1979, we were a public official, and then after the military coup, we became an opposition party. Several times going to jail, being tried for treason. And then our country progressed on 1985 up to 1990 when there was a civil uprising by way of the war. All of that eventually there have been an upset about young youth during that period from 1985 to 1990. And then eventually we participated in the 1997 elections, and then the subsequent elections which have brought us this far. Against that background, the Commission felt will be very useful for the process, for us to hear from you, for us to give you the opportunity to share your experience, your perspective, and perhaps recommendations on how our country can move forward beyond our current situation. With that, we want to see you by that privilege. Thanks very much for coming, and you are cordially welcome. I will take this time just before you move into your presentation to introduce commissioners who are here present. We are the commissioners, others are not here for reasons beyond our control. On our left is Commissioner Sheikh Kafu Makone. Next to him is Commissioner Humu Sila. Next to her, immediate at my left is Commissioner Gerald Kuma. And immediate at my right is Commissioner Per Brown. I Jerome Radio. And then we have Dr. Nevis of the International Technical Advisor. I want to thank you once more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. I said I would be here, and I'm here. Allow me to start with a little bit of perspective. I grew up in a family that represented the diversity of this nation. The good and the bad, you might say. My grandmother, my mother's mother, came from Sino Township. That's where my mother was born. She was an illiterate who had never come to Liberia. School. My mother grew up there until such time that she was taken by a family in Monrovia, the Dunbar family, and where she was raised. And the reason she was taken is that my grandmother was married in a traditional way to a German merchant. And so she was very fair and looked very much like a white person. And so that attracted her to many families in Monrovia. She was finally taken by the Dunbar family. And my grandmother allowed her to come to Monrovia so she would be able to get an education. My father was a Gola. His father was Chief Jamali, a very renowned Gola chief. His name was also changed from Jamali to Johnson because of the interaction of Chief Jamali with Elijah Johnson and all of those. But my grandmother, my father's mother, was also an illiterate. She was Gola. She never came to Monrovia. And so my father also was brought to Monrovia to live in a family, the Makere family, where he lived and became an apprentice at law. So in our family, like I said, reflecting the diversity, I had two grandmothers that until they died, they could not read or write. They knew poverty, they knew degradation. But I also had mother and father that grew up in an elitist atmosphere and went to an education, so you might say that they passed. And so they knew the good life that came from what was then called the Congo people. But I'm glad that we never forgot our roots. We spent a lot of time in the village. We go to our village with our traditional village that we go to even today, with our illiterate Gola grandmother. And our illiterate Kru grandmother spent a lot of time with us in Monrovia. And as a result, I think today we all have a different perspective on who we are and what Liberia ought to be. I then, you might say my activism started In 1955, which was the year I graduated from the College of West Africa. And that was the year when there was the attempted coup with the President Tubman was there. The Tubman and the executive mansion was there, the old mansion on National Street. And as you know, the PWA is just a little bit up the hill from there. And during the attempted coup, the soldiers were all in the street. And many of us then came out and had to go into the bushes to watch what was going on. And that was when, I forget who it was, they attempted a coup against Tubman, but it ended up with David Coleman being the one that was eventually charged. And I remember until this day a photograph in a local newspaper that read, from this to this. The from this was David Coleman in a suit with a top hat. To this, his riddled body in a Kinja. I got married right after high school. And so activism for me came to an end, except these things that were implanted upon my mind. And it wasn't until four children later, when I went back to school, to college, and did not come back into, you may call it professional political life, until I returned home after college and went to work for what was then the Department of the Treasury. This was in 1964. I was merely a junior professional. I worked on a Jimmy Weeks. And in 69 was the first time, you may say, that I spoke out against what was going on in society. This was a development conference at the University of Liberia that was programmed by what was then the Harvard University team that was working with our Ministry of Planning and Economic Affairs. And I represented the Department of Treasury at that conference. And I made certain statements about the policies of government and why changes was necessary in the society. It was felt that I would get in trouble as a result of what I said. And Dr. Papanek, the head of the Harvard team, then quickly arranged for me to leave the country and to go to Harvard for graduate study. One might say that a little touch of activism came at Harvard because at that time there was a protest against the Vietnam War. And I happened to have joined some of the protests, though I was not an American, and had no problem with the Vietnamese or the Americans, but joined it anyway because it was an exciting thing to do. After my completion, I returned home in 1971. President Tubman had died, and President Toba had taken over as the Minister of Finance, to which I was returning, then called the Minister of Finance, with Stephen Toba as the minister. I worked, and then in 1972, I gave the famous PWA speech when I spoke at the commencement address of my alma mater. And that speech pointed out what I said were some serious distortions in our society and in our policies. That the great divide that we have faced in our country still existed, that resources were not used to unify the people. In any case, many will remember, and that speech is available today, that in 72, in a way, I predicted a coup d'etat, which finally came in 1980. That speech got me into problems with the Toba government, and ultimately I had to leave In 1973, I left the government and went, you might say, to exile, but with a job with the World Bank. And I stayed at the bank until 1977. During that period, I was not involved in any activism. I was positioned in my professional life. In 1977, Steve Tober had died, and Jim Phillips had taken over as the Minister of Finance. He was able to persuade the bank to enable me to come back home. Of course, we had, during that period, was the preparation of the OAU conference, and of course in 1979 was the infamous race riots. After the riots, I was one of those who served on the Brownell Commission that made certain recommendations to government, and I have a copy of the Brownell Commission's report, which I can make available to you. You'll see my signature on it, in which we made certain recommendations to the government about trying to change the political situation. As you may know, those recommendations were not respected. But ultimately, Minister Phillips was in a way held responsible, and President Tober asked me to assume in August of 1979 the position of Minister of Finance, which I held until the April 1980 coup d'etat. I was removed from the position, but I was one of the 4 ministers that was saved by the PRC. Myself, Kit Bryan, who was then the Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Gilbert Tucker, who was then the Minister of Public Works, and Finney Gunso, who was then the Minister of Rural Development. And I can't see why we were saved, except the perception of those, of the coup makers who may have thought we were not the aggressors. In any case, I was one of those who felt that the change that had come, that we in a way had brought it on ourselves because of our failure to have made those changes in society over all the many years. And so I took a position in the Dole government. I was asked to serve as the president of the Liberian Development Bank. There were many of the old order who thought that because I took a position in the Dole government, and because in a way we endorsed the Dole government, that we were part of the coup makers, and that we knew of the coup. That was far from the truth. Did not know it, did not know any of them. But again, like I say, many of us felt that it was time to be positive. And I then, at the end of 1970, after the coup, 1980, sorry, at the end of 1980, after the coup, it was clear, even though I took a position, we're working, that many of us were staying as part of the old order. And so we were always confronted with, these old people, the old people who stay in this government, they were not something. And so at the end of 1980, because I was on secondment from the World Bank, I asked the bank to ask the government to release me back to the service of the bank, which they did. And I went back to Washington. And the following year, of course, I went to work with Citibank in Nairobi. I stayed there until the call for general elections in '85, and I was, asked by many of my colleagues to come and join in forming a party, which was then the Liberia Action Party. And so I came, and we did form the party. As many will know, the party was not allowed to be registered. I then left I left the country in July of 85, and I was invited to go and speak at the Union of Association of Liberian Association ULA in the United States. And the person who happened to have been president of the union at that time was Tom Louise. And so I went and spoke in Philadelphia, where the meeting was held. And again, it was a pretty tough speech in which, having come to Liberia back and forth in the dual government and having seen what I consider to be a deterioration in what was happening in the country, with so many of the PRC members having been killed, with what happened with the university students, etc. I took a pretty tough position in that statement also. And when I returned, I was put on a house arrest. I was called, the details of that, you can get if you want, but I was called before President Joe and others, subsequently with Justice Minister Jacob Scott at the time, taken on a house arrest where I stayed for a while, and because there was some interaction with the public, I finally ended up being taken from my home on a house arrest and was then taken to Fort Stockade.
Can we maybe adjust the microphone so that your hands can be
I then was looking for Fort Stockade, and I happened to have been there with quite a few university students. And we stayed in there for about a couple of months. I was charged with sedition and taken before a military tribunal, where after this proceedings I was declared guilty and sentenced to 10 years as hard labor. But at this time, of course, there was a lot of attention to those political proceedings. And so I served, I did not serve the full term, served for the 2 months then. And while I was in prison, our party was indeed registered. And I came out. There were attempts for us for me to renounce and to leave, and I protested. I would not do that. And so I did go and campaign for then that presidential candidate of Jackson Dole, with Emmanuel Kumar as the vice presidential candidate. And we went and campaigned very heavily. We did not won the election, but the official results did not accept that. And then there was the triumphal coup that followed the election in December of 85. And again, there were few people that were in touch, with the triumphal coup. I think it was trying to get some transportation from people like Jim Holder and Robert Phillips, who was then in country, all of them, and Harry Greenfield. I don't think they were ever able to give help. I was aware that they were trying to get transportation help from these people. And we at that time were actively engaged in trying to point out the excesses of the Dole government fighting for political change. And so on the day of the coup, when everyone thought that the Cuba had abused of Syria, Mr. Phillips did come into my yard, jubilated, and we came outside and we were all happy. Change had come. Of course, as we all know, the coup failed, and so I got arrested again. I had people that came out when we were charged with participating in the coup and was then taken to the Sheffield military base. were gunshots. I can only assume that they were killed since they never came back. And there's a whole episode on how I was taken there, which will come out in details, but as things will happen, I eventually was taken from there and taken to Templeton, where so many of the political oppositioners were in there. We stayed in the central prison for 7 months. We were all then released in '86, and I went into exile and went to the United States. Many people know that during the period when I came out of prison until I was able to escape, I went through a lot of surveillance. I slept in different homes at different nights. People were chasing so many of us. With the help of your friends, I was able to get out. I ended up in the United States and started an association with an affiliate of the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, and that's when we formed the Association for Constitutional Democracy in Nigeria, ACDL, and actively started a political campaign to point out the excesses of the Bull government and the need for political change. This effort culminated in the conference in Banjul, and at that time during this period, I was in touch with Tom Muriu, because, as I said, Tom Muriu was the one who was President of Angola, and in fact, he testified, I forgot to mention that. At the time, there was a hearing in the U.S. Congress, and he testified on my behalf at the U.S. Congress. And in that respect, he was in ACDL, and we did talk and have good relationships. When we went to Banjul, well, let me back up a little bit. ACDL, Tom Muriu, at the time we did not know. Tom Muriu was a part of the Taylor group and PFL. And he introduced the Taylor Rebellion to many of us in ACDL. There were some of us who agreed with it, who agreed that a rebellion was necessary. And I will admit to you that I was one of those. I did agree that a rebellion was necessary. I myself, I think Harry Greaves and others. There were others like Ezekiel Pajibu, Patrick Sale, who were members of ACDL, Dr. Sawyer, who may have disagreed that a rebellion was necessary. And so we started to say, well, let's see what it is. But I was never a member of the MPFL. Absolutely not. What I did do was to meet at Tom's request with Mr. Taylor in Paris. When I went for a meeting there, he brought me there one morning to meet with me. And they went through it. I thought it was very strange. People who were making a rebellion at that time wanted to call for breakfast, and the response was, the money that you spent for breakfast, give us the money. And so the communication with Tom continued. Harry Greaves went out once to be able to assess the situation as to whether truly was this a true rebellion, was it something else here. He came back and his assessment was not that positive. He thought it was just a bunch of people trying to make something but did not have the capacity to do what they wanted. He may have been wrong because he may not have known all the details. In any case, when the rebellion started in December, Christmas Eve, we knew about it, we heard about it. At this point, I also was in touch with people in the State Department of the U.S. because they were also monitoring the situation. I was in Washington. And so they were also in touch with me, feeding me with information and exchanging information on what was happening. We thought this was a genuine rebellion, and it turned out to be what we consider the people's movement. Because as it gathered, there was a certain amount of discipline. Elmer Johnson, who came out to join that rebellion, was also living in the Washington area. And when he was coming out, he did tell us that he was coming out to join the Tequila, and that he would bring his military team as he had been in the U.S. military to there to instill some discipline into it. As the story goes, Elmer was supposed to go. The thing with Jackson and others who we had talked to people about ensuring their safety by taking them behind the lines. They were taking behind the lines and they reportedly killed by him. And so when I went to Abidjan to participate in the May 1990, let me back up. We then, because there's this thing about the money, we ACDL for a lot of us at ACDL, and I think with the Greens even with letters, and told people soliciting funds. $10,000 was raised and was sent. At that time, sent to the Tequila with the hope that they were then having this problem in Lima between the Maguilos and the Manos and the Greens, set as a means of saying what they could do to bring them all together. The whole thing started to be questioned. Was it really, as they progressed, what we saw was the people's movement beginning to turn into the usual type of carnage and destruction and whatnot. What indeed is was meant to be, what we heard it to be, or what our expectations were based upon the Ottoman things which became over the years. And so in May 1990, I went to Abidjan to participate in the annual meeting of the African Union. I decided I wanted to see what this discipline was all about. Some British journalists who were also there wanted to come with me. And so we sent a message that we wanted to do a cross because at the time we had Tequila was right across the river, I think it was Buto across the boundary. And so we did go to the boundary side, the Nigerian side, and stayed there. Of the British journalists and the message being that we took the time. After a few hours, the message came back that said, yes, I could do it, but not the British government. I did so. By this time, it was towards us. And what I saw there, when I went into this place, with was there, with a couple of Lebanese and rice and other kinds of things in the morning. And the rationing made in by the war was going to restore trying to power and Constantino also and all of those things. You got the troublemakers and all these other people, etc. I did not research. A lot of red-eyed young people who were and after that, for me, it was a downhill to do after that meeting. And finally,
After I finished the work, I can see that I'm not getting the sound. You want a microphone down a little bit? I'm sorry. I hope we don't have to really interrupt. Like, is it okay?
very well. Is that better? And so I came back to Washington. We still continue to put an ear to listen support. In July, we thought Mr. Taylor was going to finally take over, and that's when the statement I made about we celebrated and great campaign. And then after that, the whole situation just goes downhill. And after the killing of Jackson and Sugar Pule and others, we then concluded that the whole thing of Mr. Taylor was not what it was meant to be. In 1992, I I then joined the United Nations with UNDP. And from 1992 until 1997, I was a member of the United Nations. And I could not and did not